The glow of the smartphone screen was the last light in the dark bedroom, a cold, rectangular moon against the rumpled duvet. Avery's thumb moved with a hypnotic rhythm: swipe, pause, tap, swipe, each motion etching another ideal into her weary mind. A cascade of perfection scrolled by, a diamond ring glinting on a sun-drenched beach hand, captioned, "He asked at our spot." A couple in matching Farrell sweaters, laughing as they iced a gingerbread house, tagged #elfing around #Christmas goals. A surprise birthday party where a woman wept joyfully in a room filled with blush pink balloons. The text reading, "He remembered my favorite color is balloon blush." Avery's own room was silent except for the soft, even breaths of Sam, asleep beside her. He slept like he did everything, steadily, reliably, turned away from the light of her screen. She paused on a new post. It was Chloe, her college roommate. The photo was a masterclass in casual romance, a blurry Parisian bistro backdrop, golden evening light, Chloe leaning across a tiny marble table, being fed a strawberry by her husband, Mark. Chloe's eyes were crinkled shut with laughter. Mark gazed at her with adoring focus. The caption was a knife disguised as cotton candy. "When he remembers your favorite fruit after 12 years and steals the last one." #soulmate #relationship goals. Avery's chest constricted with a familiar, hollow ache. It was a mixture of longing, envy, and a sharp, nagging anxiety. She looked from the luminous, curated joy on her screen to the shadowy profile of her boyfriend of 4 years.
Sam was a good man.
A great man, by any reasonable standard. A software engineer whose code was elegant and whose heart was kind. He remembered her allergy to penicillin, her irrational fear of house centipedes, and that she liked the crusts cut off her sandwiches. He was steady as a metronome. Tuesday was pasta night. Friday they ordered from the Thai place. Sunday mornings he did the crossword with a ferocious, quiet concentration she found endearing. Their life was a well-made bed, neat, comfortable, and predictable. But when she tried to superimpose the image of Sam onto Chloe's Parisian scene, it glitched. Sam would have diligently ordered the strawberries, yes. But he'd likely have pushed the plate toward her with a sweet, distracted smile before returning to his phone to check the score of a game or the status of a server. The gesture would have been thoughtful, but it wouldn't have been a moment. It wouldn't have been a snapshot. It wouldn't have been a goal. The hollowness turned into a quiet, desperate resolve. It wasn't that something was missing in Sam. It was that something was missing in their framework. They had the foundation of a good relationship, but they'd never built the spectacular house upon it that everyone else seemed to be living in. They had love, but did they have goals? With Sam sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the quiet crisis beside him, Avery opened a new note on her phone. The blank page felt like a promise. At the top, she typed in bold letters, "Perfect relationship goals." Her thumbs flew, translating the night's scrolling envy into a concrete action plan. 1. Weekly themed date nights. No more default Thai. Murder mysteries, speakeasy cocktails, at-home Venetian carnivale. 2. Surprise just because gifts/gestures. Flowers on a Wednesday. Love notes in lunch bags. A playlist for a rainy day. 3. Annual adventure travel. Minimum 2 new countries. Prioritize photogenic locales. Must have a signature couple's photo from each. 4. Increased physical spontaneity. More unsolicited kisses, hand-holding, back hugs while doing dishes. Less roommate-like coexistence. 5. Cultivate a shared, photogenic hobby. Salsa dancing? Pottery? Mixology? Something that looks dynamic in a 15-second clip. 6. Intentional digital documentation. Regular, high-quality posts that reflect our brand as a happy, adventurous, in-love couple. She read the list over, a flutter of excitement replacing the ache. This was it. This was the blueprint. This was how you transformed a quiet, loving partnership into a dazzling, enviable epic. Sam was her perfect, if slightly unwitting, construction partner. He was loyal, he loved her, and he was terrible at saying no to her. The raw materials were all there.
She just needed to be the architect.
She saved the note, titled it Project Us, and finally placed her phone on the nightstand. In the new dark, she rolled over and looked at Sam's sleeping form. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. "We're going to be perfect," she whispered into the quiet room, a soft smile on her lips. It was a promise, a prophecy, and a plan, all in one. All they had to do was follow the blueprint. The blueprint, now dubbed Project Us in Avery's notes, became her sacred text. She approached its implementation with the fervor of a lifestyle guru launching a flagship program. Week 1's goal: weekly themed date nights. No more passive Thai takeout on the couch while Sam muttered about server loads. That Friday, she greeted him at the door not with her usual kiss, but with a flourish. "We're going on an adventure," she announced, her eyes sparkling with purpose. Sam, shrugging off his work backpack, looked pleasantly surprised. "Okay? Did that new taco place finally open?" "Better." She produced 2 printed tickets from behind her back like a magician. "Murder Mystery Dinner Cruise. The SS Intrigue. We board at 7. Sam's smile faltered for a microsecond, a flicker of hesitation she chose not to see. "Tonight? I was just going to finish the cantilever on Falling Water." "It's a tricky structural. It's spontaneous," she interjected, her voice a perfect melody of persuasive enthusiasm. She held up a fedora and a string of faux pearls. "And look, I got us character props. You're Mickey the Mechanic, a man with a past. I'm Gloria the Chanteuse, a singer with a secret." The cruise was a 3-hour cacophony of overacting, gelatinous shrimp, and a suspect champagne that tasted of fermented apple juice. Sam played his part with bemused diligence. He interrogated the suspicious butler about grease stains and alibis with a sincere, engineering-focused intensity that was technically correct but utterly devoid of theatrical flair. Avery, however, was in her element. She angled her body toward the glittering city skyline, fedora tilted just so, whispering conspiratorially to Sam for a photo that looked candid. She captured the moment the victim, a cheerful retiree from Ohio, collapsed into the rubber chicken. "Perfect," she hissed, reviewing the shot. The city lights were a beautiful bouquet behind them, her pearls gleamed. Sam's expression was polite. She could fix that with a filter. Later, she selected the best of 43 takes. She applied a filter called Noir Glam, sharpening the contrast, making the water look inkier, her lipstick more dramatic. The caption wrote itself: "My partner in crime-solving and life. When he looks at you like you're the only dame in the room. Man Detective Kiss Mark #SS Intrigue #Date Night Magic #Relationship Goals." The likes and heart-eye emojis poured in. "Goals," commented Chloe from Paris. The validation was a warm, effervescent wave in her chest. This was working. The surprise just because initiative launched next. She bought him a sleek, minimalist watch that cost half a paycheck. He thanked her, kissed her forehead, and wore it to their next date, a 1920s speakeasy night where the password was flapper. But the next day and every day after, she saw his familiar, utilitarian fitness tracker back on his wrist. The expensive watch sat in its velvet box on his dresser, a beautiful, lonely monument to a gesture he didn't need. She filled the apartment with lush, fragrant peonies, his mild allergy be damned. The sneezes were a small price for the aesthetic. She signed them up for Argentine tango lessons, insisting the passion and connection were exactly what we need. Sam accommodated it all. He was the most compliant construction crew a project manager could ask for. He learned the tango steps with a programmer's precision. Ocho here, pivot there, his movements mathematically correct, but emotionally sterile. He wore the watch. He smiled for the photos. He tolerated the flowers. But a quiet distance began to yawn between the orchestrated events. The comfortable silences they used to share, him with his Legos, her with a book, now felt charged with her unspoken list of unmet goals and his unspoken exhaustion. The breaking point, though she didn't recognize it as such at the time, came after a particularly elaborate DIY sushi and sake night. The kitchen looked like a panko crumb tsunami had hit it. Avery was trying to get the perfect overhead shot of their lopsided salmon rolls artfully arranged on a slate board, a bottle of sake tipped just so into the corner of the frame. Sam stood at the sink, methodically scrubbing rice starch from a bowl. The quiet swish-swish of the sponge was the only sound. Sam, tilt your head toward the nigiri a bit more. Look intrigued by the wasabi. He didn't turn. He kept scrubbing. Avery, he said, his voice low and weary, cutting through her director's commentary. This is all really nice. Truly. But do we have to document every single thing we do? He finally looked over his shoulder, his eyes not angry, just profoundly tired. Can't we just do it? Can't we just eat the lopsided sushi? A flash of hot, defensive irritation shot through her. He didn't understand. The documentation was part of doing it. It was the proof of concept, the quality assurance, the public launch. It made the experience real. People love seeing us happy, Sam, she said, her voice tighter, sharper than she intended. She put her phone down, the perfect shot forgotten. It's about sharing our joy. It inspires people. He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze seeing past the filter, past the theme, right to the frantic architect inside her. Then he simply nodded, turning back to the clean, rinsed bowl. He dried it with the same meticulous care he applied to his plastic bricks, placing it silently in the cupboard. The silence that descended wasn't the quiet of companionship. It was the hollow, echoing quiet of a beautiful set after the actors have left the stage and the audience has gone home. It was the sound of a blueprint starting to show its first hairline crack. Portugal was to be the magnum opus of Project Us. The crown jewel, the live-action feature film based on the best-selling blueprint. For 6 weeks, Avery lived in a state of manic, Pinterest-boarded anticipation. She researched not just locations, but photogenic locations. She booked the Airbnb in Lagos not for its amenities, but for its stunning, south-facing terrace with unobstructed sea views, perfect for golden hour portraits. She curated 2 matching, linen-centric travel wardrobes designed to look effortlessly rumpled in photos. The itinerary was a military-grade operation of beauty. Day 1, arrival and sunset welcome drinks on terrace. Day 2, cliff hike to Praia de Marinha, most photogenic beach in Europe. Day 3, kayaking through Benagil Sea Cave, GoPro footage essential. Day 4, wine tour in Douro Valley, romantic vineyard picnic. Day 5, Fado music dinner in Lisbon, moody, atmospheric lighting. Sam packed his bag the night before, silently folding his own, more practical clothes beside her artfully arranged piles. He asked only one question: will there be time to just wander? Of course, Avery said, tapping her tablet.
See?
Day 6, free day for serendipitous exploration. It's scheduled. He had just looked at her, that familiar, quiet depth in his eyes she had no time to decode. The first 2 days went according to plan. The terrace photos were spectacular. The hike to Praia de Marinha was strenuous, but yielded breathtaking cliffside shots where she looked windswept and free. Sam was a dutiful model, holding her hand when directed, smiling on cue. But a stillness had settled over him, a polite detachment. He was present, but not there. He felt like a highly capable assistant on a photo shoot, not a lover on an adventure. The crack appeared on day 3, on the meticulously planned cliffside walk to the hidden Praia do Camilo. The path was a narrow ribbon of dust and stone carved into the orange cliffs, the Atlantic a dazzling, impossible blue far below. It was, as promised, stunning. It was also teeming with people, all clutching phones and selfie sticks, a slow-moving pilgrimage to the same vista. Avery was ahead, scanning for the perfect vantage point, her phone already in her hand. Sam, come here. The light on the water right now is insane. We can get the whole cove in the background. She turned, framing the shot in her mind. But Sam hadn't moved. He stood 10 feet back, planted in the middle of the dusty path, oblivious to the tourists having to shuffle around him. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at his feet, clad in the stylish but impractical leather sneakers she'd bought him for the trip. Sam? Honey? The light won't last. He looked up. His face, usually so placid, was a mask of quiet resolve. The ocean wind whipped between them.
Avery, he said.
His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the coastal breeze and the chatter of strangers with the clarity of a shattering glass. I don't want to go to the beach. A laugh bubbled out of her, nervous and dismissive.
What?
Don't be silly. We're almost there. This is the highlight. I don't want to go. Each word was deliberate, a brick being laid in a wall she hadn't seen him building. I'm tired. My feet hurt from these shoes. I don't want to listen to melancholic father music tonight. I don't want another authentic experience that's been pre-sold to 1,000 people before us. The blueprint in her mind, so vivid and detailed, began to pixelate and dissolve. This was not in the code. This was a critical system error. But, she stammered, the wind suddenly feeling cold. The itinerary, the photos, Praia do Camilo is supposed to be. The itinerary is suffocating me. He took a step toward her, not angrily, but with a terrifying solidity. I feel like I'm an actor in The Perfect Life of Avery, and I'm just reciting lines. Building the set. Holding the reflector. When do I get to be Sam? When do we get to have an experience that isn't already a caption waiting to happen? The words landed like physical blows. The hollowness she'd been trying so desperately to fill with perfect images yawned open, a chasm at her feet. She stared at him, at the man who could spend 12 hours assembling a microscopic Eiffel Tower with saintly patience, but who rebelled against a walk to a world-famous beach. The man who had loved her steadily, quietly, for 4 years, and who she had, in her quest for a spectacular story, completely stopped seeing. He wasn't refusing the beach. He was refusing the role. Tears, hot and shameful, pricked at her eyes, blurred the perfect view. The phone in her hand felt ridiculous, a toy. All around them, the pilgrimage to beauty continued, the click of shutters a relentless soundtrack. What do you want to do? She whispered, the question sounding foreign and broken. He looked past her, down the path to the crowded cove, then back the way they came. His shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in release. I want to go back to that little plaza we passed in town. The one with the ugly, concrete fountain with the stained cherub. I want to sit there, eat a massively overpriced ham and cheese sandwich from that grumpy man's kiosk, and watch pigeons fight over a crust. And I don't, he said, his gaze locking with hers, want to take a single picture of it. In that moment, standing on the edge of a postcard-perfect cliff, Avery felt the entire facade of Project Us crack wide open. Behind it wasn't the ruin she feared, but something far more terrifying. A blank, empty space. And the quiet, unfamiliar man standing in it, waiting for her to see him, finally, without a filter. The flight home from Portugal was a study in suspended animation. They sat side by side in the humming metal tube, separated by a chasm of unspoken words. Avery stared at the seatback map, the little plane icon inching over the Atlantic, a pathetic representation of the vast distance that had opened up between them. Sam put on headphones and closed his eyes, but the tension in his jaw told her he wasn't sleeping. The apartment welcomed them with a sterile chill. It felt like a museum exhibit entitled Life Before the Crack. The matching throw pillows on the gray sofa, plumped and aligned, now seemed like artifacts of a lost civilization. The sleek, unused cocktail shaker from their mixology phase gathered a thin layer of dust on the open shelving. The silence was no longer comfortable, it was forensic, examining every abandoned prop of their performance. Sam didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't launch into a lecture. He simply, and with a quiet finality that was more devastating than anger, stopped participating. He returned to his Legos, but not to falling water. He went to the closet and pulled out a large, plain storage bin filled with loose bricks, a colorful, chaotic sea of potential. He dumped them onto the rug in the living room with a sound like rain, and for hours, he would just sit there, sifting, clicking pieces together with no instruction manual in sight. He was building something that had no picture on a box, no prescribed outcome. It was a silent, tangible rebellion. Avery drifted through the rooms like a ghost. The energy she'd once poured into Project Us now had nowhere to go, curdling inside her into a thick sludge of shame and confusion. She opened her phone to the Project Us note. The list of goals, once so bright and promising, now glared back at her with the sterile cruelty of a failed business plan. 1 weekly themed date nights, a memory of a man in a fedora, looking politely baffled. 2. Surprise just because gifts, a vision of an expensive watch in a dark box. 3. Annual adventure travel, the taste of a dry, overpriced sandwich by an ugly fountain. With a trembling thumb, she highlighted the entire note. The phone asked calmly, "Delete note Project Us? This action cannot be undone." She stared at the words. Deleting it felt like an admission of total, humiliating failure. It was conceding that the perfect life was unbuildable, that she was unworthy of the goals. A hot tear splashed onto the screen. She pressed delete. The emptiness that followed was absolute. The next evening, she came home from work drained. The sound of plastic clicking came from the living room. She expected to see the half-finished skeleton of a spaceship or a castle. Instead, she found Sam on the floor, surrounded by a sprawling, bewildering landscape. It was a monstrous, beautiful hybrid. A Gothic castle turret, built with dark gray bricks, erupted from the engine nacelle of a star cruiser. A drawbridge lowered not over a moat, but onto the ringed surface of a neon-green planet. Knights with laser lances stood beside robots holding shields. It was glorious nonsense. It made no sense, and it was utterly, uniquely his. She stood in the doorway, her coat still on, her bag dangling from her hand. "What is this?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper in the quiet room. He didn't look up from where he was carefully attaching a flame piece to a dragon's mouth. "I don't know yet," he said, his focus on the connection. "It's not from a manual. I'm just building." The simplicity of it stunned her.
Just building.
Not for a theme. Not for a photo. Not to achieve a goal or meet a standard. Just the pure, intuitive act of creation, for its own sake. A question rose in her, small and fragile. It wasn't on any list. It had no objective. It was just curiosity. "Can I help?" He froze, his hand hovering over a pile of translucent blue bricks. Slowly, he looked up. His eyes searched her face, not for the director, the architect, the curator, but for her. For Avery, who was just standing there, lost and coat-clad, asking a simple question. The silence stretched, thin and taut. He saw the red-rimmed eyes, the defeated slope of her shoulders. He saw the deleted blueprint in the hollow of her expression. A small, almost imperceptible shift occurred in his own face. The guarded stillness softened by a degree. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. He nudged the bin of bricks toward her with his foot. "Pass me that red, hinged piece? The one that looks like a wing." She knelt on the rug, the plastic bricks cool and unfamiliar under her palms. She found the piece, a vibrant red, and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed. It was the first real contact since the cliffside. For an hour, they didn't talk about Portugal. They didn't talk about their relationship. They didn't talk about failure or goals. They sat in a pool of lamplight, surrounded by colorful chaos. "What about a satellite here?" she ventured once, pointing to a bare spot on the neon planet. "Might block the dragon's flight path," he mused, holding up a night to gauge the trajectory. "But maybe a small, crashed one? Like debris?" She found a broken-looking antenna piece. "This looks suitably crashed." A faint smile touched his lips. "Perfect." They passed bricks back and forth. They pointed. They tried things and took them apart. They built without a destination. And in that quiet, collaborative unsolding of the old, rigid fantasy, something new, fragile, and utterly uncharted began, brick by humble brick, to quietly assemble itself between them. The great, silent demolition of Project Us left a cleared lot. At first, Avery wandered this emotional space disoriented, expecting to trip over the phantom structures of themed date nights and photo shoot locations. But as the dust settled, her eyes, so long trained on horizons and backdrops, began to adjust. She started to notice the small, living things that had been growing in the shade of her grand architecture all along. She noticed the heating pad. On Tuesday night, a sudden spring chill had seeped into the apartment. She'd been burrowing under the blankets, her feet like ice. Sam had gotten up to use the bathroom and, on his way back, had detoured to the closet. Without a word, he plugged in the heating pad, set it to medium, and slipped it under the duvet on her side of the bed. By the time he slid back in beside her, her space was a pocket of radiant warmth. He'd done this for years. She'd simply stopped feeling it, expecting it as one expects gravity. She noticed the tea. A brutal deadline at work had her hunched over her laptop at the dining table long after dinner, a knot of tension solidifying between her shoulder blades. She was so deep in a spiral of stress, she didn't hear him approach. A mug appeared silently by her elbow. Ceramic, not the photogenic best girlfriend, one she'd bought for herself. It was his old, chipped university mug. The steam carried the precise, honeyed scent of chamomile with a slice of ginger, exactly how she liked it when she was anxious. He hadn't asked if she wanted tea. He'd known. He'd made it. He'd left it. By the time she registered it was there, he was already back on the couch, his attention returned to a documentary about hydrothermal vents, the narrator's voice a low rumble. One night, she actually listened. The narrator was describing the Lost City hydrothermal field, a bizarre, alkaline ecosystem unlike any other on Earth. It's a world that operates on a different chemistry, the voice intoned, proving that life isn't just adaptable, it can be fundamentally, astonishingly different than we assumed. Sam was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, utterly rapt. The blue light of the screen played over his features, illuminating a look of pure, unguarded wonder. It was the same look he'd had when he'd finally solved the cantilever on falling water. It was a look he never had during a tango dip or a murder mystery charade. Tentatively, like a tourist in a strange land, she began to visit his world. Not as a director, but as a guest. She sat on the other end of the sofa. "So, it's not volcanic?" she asked during a pause. He startled, as if remembering she was there. Oh, no. That's the fascinating part. The heat isn't from magma. It's a chemical reaction between seawater and the mantle rock. It creates these huge, ghostly white spires. They call them cathedrals. He spoke quickly, his hands sketching shapes in the air. And the life, giant tube worms, weird shrimp, it all thrives on methane and hydrogen, not sunlight. It's a completely independent blueprint for life. He talked for 10 straight minutes, about serpentinization, about chemosynthesis, his voice animated with a passion she realized had been there all along, just never activated by her curated playlists. She asked another question. And another. He answered with the eager depth of someone who had been waiting, for a very long time, to share a beloved secret. The following Saturday, there was no itinerary, no reservation. They got in the car with no destination. They drove until they saw a hand-painted, sun-faded sign. World's largest collection of miniature donkeys. Next right. Sam snorted. That is either the best or worst thing we'll ever see. We're morally obligated, Avery said, and for the first time in months, her smile felt real, unpracticed. It was a dusty, slightly smelly farm filled with preposterously small, fuzzy donkeys with enormous, soulful eyes. It was absurd. It was terrible. It was wonderful. Sam crouched down to be eye level with a tiny brown donkey named Peanut, making a soft clicking sound with his tongue. The donkey brayed, a surprisingly loud noise for such a small creature, and Sam threw his head back and laughed. It was a full, unself-conscious, belly-deep laugh that echoed in the quiet field. It was a sound that bypassed her mind and went straight to her heart, fluttering it in a way no perfectly staged, romantic kiss ever had. In the ramshackle gift shop, he presented her with a hideous mug. It was neon green, emblazoned with a cartoon donkey wearing a crown and the words, "The Big Little Boss." "A souvenir," he said, his eyes still crinkled with laughter. for our cultural immersion. Later, they found a dusty diner off the highway and ate slices of pie that tasted faintly of freezer. Avery did not reach for her phone. She did not angle the pie plate for better light. She just looked at him, at the way his hair was mussed from the farm wind, at the fading laughter lines still visible around his eyes, at the humble, horrible mug sitting proudly between them. This moment was terribly, imperfectly beautiful. It was unscripted, unphotogenic, and entirely theirs. No filter, no caption, no audience. It was a quiet, shared heartbeat in a dusty vinyl booth, and it felt more real, more solid, than anything on her deleted list ever had. It wasn't a goal achieved, it was a discovery made. And it was brick by unassuming brick, becoming their new foundation. The call came at 3:17 a.m., a brutal, digital scythe cutting through the fragile piece they'd been building. Avery's mother's voice on the line was a thin, frayed wire of terror. "It's your father. His heart. They're taking him in an ambulance." The world, so recently recalibrated to the gentle scale of donkey mugs and documentary wonder, violently telescoped down to a single, sterile point, the ICU waiting room. The beeping monitors from beyond the double doors were a maddening, metallic heartbeat. The vinyl chairs were slick with other people's dread. The air tasted of antiseptic and stale coffee. In this stark, white light world, the vocabulary of Project Us died instantly. There were no goals here, only grim, hourly updates. There was no photogenic, only the pallid, exhausted faces of her mother and brother. Sam did not bring peonies. He arrived an hour after they did, carrying a worn duffel bag. He didn't try to hug her while she was vibrating with panic. Instead, he wordlessly unzipped the bag. He pulled out a sturdy, memory foam travel pillow and a long phone charger. "For your mom," he said quietly, handing them to her. "And you." While Avery sat frozen, staring at the closed doors as if her will alone could stabilize her father's rhythm, Sam made calls. He spoke to Avery's brother in low, calm tones, coordinating who would handle the house, the dog. He called Avery's mother every 3 hours when she went home to shower, so Avery wouldn't have to break her vigil to repeat the same non-news. Stable, but critical. Still sedated. He went to their apartment and returned with a soft, practical bag for Avery, sweatpants, a worn university hoodie, toothbrush. No outfits. And he brought the ugly, neon green donkey mug, washed and filled with hot, weak tea from the cafeteria. "It's terrible tea," he said, placing it in her hands. Her fingers were icy. The ceramic was almost too hot. The contrast shocked her system. But it's in the right mug. The second night was the worst. The doctors used the word storming, a brutal, poetic term for the body's chaotic rebellion. The prognosis, which had been cautiously grim, tipped toward dire. Avery sat on a plastic chair in the empty, darkened waiting area, shivering uncontrollably, a silent scream locked behind her teeth. She was a raw nerve exposed to the cold, humming void of potential loss. Sam didn't offer platitudes. He didn't say he's a fighter or everything happens for a reason. He simply sat down beside her, the vinyl sighing under his weight. He didn't pull her into a hug she might have shattered against. He just put his arm around her shoulders, a solid, warm weight anchoring her to the earth. After a long time, her shivering began to subside, absorbed by his steady presence. Into the terrible quiet, he spoke, his voice a low rumble in the dark. "This is really scary," he said. It was not a revelation. It was a communion, an acknowledgement of the abyss they were peering into, together. "I'm right here." That was all. No blueprint for grief. No staged comfort. Just a statement of fact and a promise of presence. "I see the terror. I am not leaving." In that moment, the final, fragile shell of her old understanding cracked and fell away. Perfect relationship goals, she realized with a clarity that was almost painful, were for fair weather. They were the decorative shutters on a house, the pretty wreath on the door. They were for sunlight. Sam was not the decoration. He was the foundation, the load-bearing wall. The unglamorous, essential pilings driven deep into the earth that you never see or think about until the hurricane comes. His love wasn't the spectacular fireworks display she'd been trying to choreograph. It was the relentless, vital hum of the emergency generator that kept the lights on and the machines running when the main power failed. It was steady. It was patient. It was structural. When, after a 72-hour nightmare, her father's vitals finally began their slow, stubborn climb towards stability, the relief was a physical collapse. In the suddenly bright cafeteria, surrounded by the mundane clatter of trays, Avery looked at Sam across the Formica table. He had shadows like bruises under his eyes. His stubble was rough. He was drinking terrible coffee from a styrofoam cup. She reached across and took his hand, her own still trembling slightly. Her voice, when it came, was raw, scraped clean of pretense. "Thank you," she whispered. The words were utterly inadequate for the debt she felt. "Thank you for not trying to be perfect." He turned his hand to lace his fingers with hers, his thumb stroking over her knuckles in a slow, grounding rhythm. He looked at her, his gaze clear and exhausted and profoundly real. "Ave," he said, the old nickname a soft anchor. "I just want to be real with you. That's the only goal that ever mattered to me." And she finally fully understood. The goal wasn't a picturesque destination. It wasn't a collection of admired moments. The goal was this: the person you could be utterly, terrifyingly real within the 3 a.m. darkness, who would not flinch from your fear, and who would hand you a hideous mug full of terrible tea. The goal was the foundation, and they were standing on it, battered but unbroken. It had passed the only test that mattered. A year later, their apartment was no longer a showroom. It was a living archive. The perfectly coordinated gray and white aesthetic had softened, warmed, been colonized by life. The hideous neon donkey mug held a place of honor in the kitchen cabinet, used for tea, for pens, for spare change. The completed Castle spaceship hybrid, now officially dubbed the Gorgon's launch pad, presided over the bookshelf, a defiant monument to unplanned creation. A framed photo from the miniature donkey farm sat on the mantel, not a glamour shot, but a slightly blurry picture of Sam mid-laugh, his face alight with pure, silly joy. It was Avery's favorite photo in the world. Avery still used Instagram, but the relationship was different. It was no longer a source of blueprints, but an occasional postcard she chose to send. Sometimes she posted a beautiful shot of the first snow dusting their fire escape. Sometimes she posted a hilarious, disastrous attempt at baking bread that resulted in a doorstop-shaped loaf. Sometimes she posted nothing for weeks. The captions were shorter, truer. "Quiet Sunday," or "Baking," 0, "Kitchen," 1. The likes and comments were a faint, pleasant ripple on a distant shore. The real ocean of her happiness was the one she swam in daily, offline. On a random, unremarkable Tuesday, they were on the reclaimed, comfy sofa they'd bought together at a flea market. Sam was in the middle of explaining a documentary he'd watched about the complex, vibrating communication of elephants. He was gesturing with a slice of pizza. "So it's not just the low-frequency rumbles they hear through their feet," he said, his eyes bright with the thrill of the fact. "They can actually shape the sound waves with their foreheads, this special sinus cavity, to focus it over miles. It's like a living organic satellite dish." Avery was half listening, half watching him. She watched the passionate cadence of his hands, the way his brow furrowed when he searched for the right word, the soft, geeky light of fascination in his eyes. She felt a surge of love so profound it was a physical ache in her chest, a deep, sweet, solid thing, rooted in the reality of him. It had nothing to do with how they looked together or how their life appeared from the outside. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't stage a kiss. She didn't wait for a pause to say something clever and quotable. She simply leaned over, the worn fabric of the sofa creaking softly, and kissed him. She kissed him right in the middle of his sentence about seismic infrasound. He stopped, the words dying on his lips. He was surprised for a second, then he smiled, a slow, real smile she felt against her mouth. His pizza-free hand came up to cradle her cheek. "What was that for?" he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "For the elephants," she whispered, her eyes closed, breathing him in. "Soap, pepperoni, home. And for you. Just because." That night, lying in the bed he still warmed for her, Avery's mind drifted back to the old list. Perfect relationship goals. She thought of it now not with shame, but with a distant, gentle pity for the woman who had written it. That woman had been trying to build a museum, a static, beautiful, climate-controlled exhibit called The Happy Couple. Every item on the list was a display case, every photo a placard explaining the curated joy. But a real relationship, she now knew, was not a museum. It was a living workshop. The light was imperfect, often from a single dangling bulb. The floor was perpetually dusty with the sawdust of small disagreements and repairs. Blueprints existed, but they were scribbled on napkins, revised constantly, stained with coffee. They were guides, not gospels. The goal was not a perfect, finished product to be admired from a rope line. The goal was the shared, ongoing, gloriously imperfect work of building something true. It was showing up at the workbench every day, not just when the inspiration struck. It was learning to use each other's tools, respecting each other's design quirks. It was the quiet satisfaction of a joint well-fixed, the laughter over a comically skewed measurement, the comfortable silence of two people sanding down a rough edge, side by side. Sam stirred in his sleep, rolling over and slinging a heavy, warm arm across her waist. She smiled in the dark, settling into his hold. The workshop was closed for the night. The tools were down. The imperfect, magnificent, ever-evolving structure they were building together stood strong around them, sheltering and real. And that was the only goal, the only design, that would ever matter again.